Hello! And I'm going to do a critical analysis of why the DC movieverse sucks. I'm going to immediately add caveats to this because here's the thing. I haven't seen the Justice League, which is the most recent addition to the DC canon of movies, anyway. But I have heard, and in a sense, this critical analysis is not gonna include the Justice League since I haven't seen it and I can't give informed opinion on it. And I often don't like using hyperbolic language like sucks or blows or what have you. But there's a definite problem with DC's movies, especially when you compare it to Marvel's movies. And I'm a DC fan. As far as the graphic novels go, as far as the comics go, I'm a DC fan. I never liked Marvel. I never liked Marvel's superheroes that much. I was never a big fan of the X-Men. I was never a big fan of Spider-Man. I was never a huge fan of the Fantastic Four. I was never a huge fan of Iron Man. I was never a huge fan of Thor or the Hulk. But the thing is, and I have huge gaps in knowledge when it comes to Marvel and its cinematic universe. I've seen all the Iron Man movies. I've seen the Avengers. I've seen the first Avengers. I've seen the first Captain America, And these are all pretty well-received movies in both critically and audience-wise. The thing with DC is that while its fans, its diehard fans, people like me even, will go to bat for the movie, the unfortunate truth is it doesn't go over well critically usually. Man of Steel, which got a pretty not a terrible critical response, but it got a pretty lukewarm response. Batman versus Superman got a very, very bad shellacking in critical circles, and even a lot of the fan base. That movie wasn't great. Suicide Squad is probably, Suicide Squad is a really, really bad movie. It's on so many levels. I remember coming out of it and trying to sell myself on it. I did this with Man of Steel too, because I did this with Man of Steel, I did this with Batman versus Superman, I did this with Suicide Squad. I tried to sell myself on the movie, which I shouldn't have to do. The movie should just be good. The movie should have just been made well, and then I come out of it, and then I just have the reaction to it. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. The question being why the DC cinematic universe seems to suffer. And I think the answer is here's the thing. There wasn't a huge upswell of these superhero movies until a certain point in time. They're prototypical examples of these movies happening, and I would point to the first Spider-Man movie, which was just a movie. It wasn't part of any bigger universe. It wasn't part of a bigger plan of superhero movies. It was just, here's Spider-Man, here's the movie, have fun. And then there was 2 more Spider-Man movies, and then this happened again on the DC side with the Nolan-verse Batman movies. These were movies that weren't really supposed to be tied into anything per se, and I guess the ownership of Spider-Man is a weird gray area, I think, between Marvel and Sony. These are kind of the prototypical good quote-unquote superhero movies, because superhero movies have had a sketchy past of having 1 or 2 good movies and then just terrible movies after that. The Superman movies, Superman 1 and 2, are generally accepted as pretty good movies, and then 3 and 4 are terrible, by and large. Same with Batman. Batman had Batman and Batman Returns, both by Tim Burton. Both are considered pretty good movies, and then you had Batman Forever, which lost a lot of people, but still had some support, and then Batman and Robin, which everybody fucking hated. And for good reason, because that movie was shitty. I think the DC movieverse kind of started in a weird area. When the idea of having a connected universe kind of kicked off, I think it's fair to say that it was with Iron Man, in the release of the first Iron Man movie. Yeah, 2008 for release of I would say in 2008 when the first Iron Man movie came out, that was like the genesis of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whereas with DC, there was not really a sense, and 2008 I believe was around when The Dark Knight was released. There wasn't a sense that this is part of something larger. There was no cameos by other superheroes and all that kind of jazz that Marvel kind of like really started getting off on in its cinematic universe. Batman Begins was just an example of like how Batman would be in the real world. And this set the tone for the entire Nolan Batman movie trilogy. There was a sense of grittiness and there was a sense of realism that I don't think was previously really adhered to, especially in the realm of superhero movies. And this is kind of like bled in to all the other DC movies kind of carried this like dark tone to them. But the thing is that they are dark, but they're like comically dark. Like that's not a good way to put it. They're pseudo dark. They're trying really hard to be dark. The Man of Steel, it's a Superman movie, but it followed on the heels of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. And you can tell that the producers or the people in charge of the product, wanted to make sure that this movie carried the kind of realism or grittiness of The Dark Knight into the world of Superman. And that's like the whole point of a dichotomous relationship like one that exists between Superman and Batman is that they are really different. A lot of people defended the dark, gritty tone of Man of Steel as to be a departure, to try something new for Superman. But the thing is that that's not what worked for Batman. What worked for Batman in the Nolanverse was going back to Batman's more serious, darker tone, because that's the kind of character that Batman is. The kind of character Superman is the opposite, essentially. I mean, he's not necessarily the big blue Boy Scout that a lot of people make him out to be. He does have some he can have a little darkness to him, but like generally speaking, his character is that of an all-powerful humanoid, basically. He's an enlightened being. If you've ever read All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, that comic arc, it's like 12 issues long. That comic arc perfectly captures the essence of Superman. Zack Snyder's Superman is not fun. I guess that's the only way to put it. He's not a fun guy. Sometimes he smiles, I guess. I don't really remember him smiling in Man of Steel, but generally speaking, this guy, and I guess there was some context for it. I mean, he was trying to find himself, quote unquote. But even the structure of the movie kind of betrays if that was the conceit, kind of like Superman finding Superman within himself. Maybe that was the whole conceit of the movie. But if it was, it executed it poorly, because essentially Superman was still saving people and he was still being Superman throughout the movie. Like he was just had a dour demeanor the entire time, or had a beard or something like that. Like it's a real shallow way of saying like, oh, this isn't your daddy or your mommy's Superman or whatever. And I think that like the choices that they made with some of the characters in that movie were kind of cool, but at the same time, there were too many instances in it where it was super not Superman. I mean, I would say the biggest things to point out are like just the saturatedness of the way that the movie looks. It's like it's dark and depressing I'm just talking about the cinematography, not the acting, I guess you would say. And it just sets a really weird tone for Superman. Like even the extended scenes on Krypton, which I thought were unnecessary. I know, it's difficult to say that like a large portion of a movie is unnecessary when it's featured so heavily in the movie, but I think like something about it was taking away from Superman and focusing too keenly on his backstory, and the whole coup scene, the unsuccessful coup that takes place on Krypton, kind of led by Zod. I mean, it gives context for Zod, I guess, but he doesn't really need that much setup, if you will. Also, a huge problem people had with Man of Steel is the ridiculous scene at the end where it's like a 45-minute fight, and this is like kind of terrible. Like, it's not. I feel like a lot of people were upset in the Superman Returns movie, which was the Superman movie that was made, I think, in like 2004 or something like that. Maybe even before that, actually. That there was, like, not enough action, and then this Superman movie was like, oh, you want action? Here's action, you motherfucker. Like, they shove it down your goddamn throat. And to the point where you're just like, wow, Superman's really letting a lot of shit slide in this fight. Like, there's a lot of destruction happening, and he's not really stopping he's not really going like, oh, I should get Zod out of here. Like, he's really causing a lot of mayhem. But yeah, he doesn't really attempt to stop that. He's more focused on beating the piss out of Zod. The Superman that we have in this movie is very, like, he's a vengeful spirit. Like, he will beat the living piss out of you. And of course, you know, a lot of people are upset that that Superman killed Zod. And by the end of it, I was like, kill Zod, fuck. He's out of control, he needs to be put down, etc., etc. Like, he's destroying the entire city. You're gonna let him kill more people? Just like, I feel like that's what Superman would have done. Like, even like idealized, unless you put him in the Phantom Zone, but the Phantom Zone doesn't seem to be part of this new grittier universe that we're dealing with. Which was, again, the tone was set by the Dark Knight trilogy. As it goes from there, like Batman versus Superman, there's just some ridiculous shit that happened in that movie. And like, I know, like, there's probably a whole wealth. I haven't seen Batman versus Superman since it came out. I saw it in the theater. Well, okay, that's probably not true. I saw it in the theater, and I think I saw it not in the theater at least once. So maybe twice. But there was a lot of badness in that movie. A lot. I mean, you know, the performance of Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, honestly, not good. But I mean, there's a bigger problem with, I mean, just shoehorning other elements of the universe in to kind of lay the groundwork for Justice League, which, I don't know. It just seemed like forced, and it seemed like it wasn't, maybe a little too much to like cram in this movie. And not enough of it was related to the actual plot of the movie. The best part, I think, is when Wonder Woman participates in the suppression of Doomsday, basically. But there was a problem. I mean, I don't think necessarily that Ben Affleck is a bad Bruce Wayne, but I don't think that's the case. I think that the writing is actually the thing that's doing the disservice to the movie, because I don't know, going from Christian Bale, who for all his faults, you could say that his Batman was kind of hammy, maybe, but I think his Bruce Wayne was pretty spot on. This one, Affleck's Bruce seems, at least in Batman vs Superman, it's too much of a departure for me. Like going from Bale to him, like I can feel it, and it's kind of jarring. And I mean, the whole interaction between Superman and Batman, until like they find the common ground between the two, which is both of their fucking mother's names are Martha. I don't know. Batman vs Superman had a lot of problems. Man of Steel was better, but it also had a tone problem, and it also had a structural editing problem. It also had it focused too much on Krypton when it should have been focusing on Superman. Going from Batman versus Superman and into Suicide Squad, and Suicide Squad was something that I was looking forward to, because it seemed like it was going to be a different story. Not your run-of-the-mill superhero story, which I was interested in. I was like, good, let's see that. I wanna have that play out. What we got in Suicide Squad was a fucking beyond, not even like beyond low rent version of the Avengers, essentially. And you're in trouble when you have like, when I say it's like the Avengers, except there's no Captain America, there's no Iron Man, there's no big names. It's literally Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, Killer Croc, the fucking, I forget, El Diablo, I think maybe his name was, the guy with the fire, and that's it. I might be missing one guy. There was Slipknot, but he dies in the beginning. It's funny because they introduce all the characters in Suicide Squad with a lot of pomp and circumstance. It's not just like, oh, by the way, here's Deadshot. Oh, by the way, here's Harley Quinn. Oh, by the way, here's Killer Croc. They all have like their own little, some bigger than others, obviously, introduction. And then they kind of tack fucking Slipknot on at the end, and you're like, okay. Alright, I guess this is they might as well just have fucking pulled a red shirt out of that van beside not Slipknot himself. That movie was just bad. There's no excuse for it, and I literally, and I'm not kidding you, I tried rationalizing this movie, walking out, because I'm such a DC mark. It's ridiculous. I tried giving this movie a pass, and it's impossible. It's impossible. It's so bad. What should have been a fun, fairly straightforward, like, heist movie turns into this convoluted mess. Just hard to understand, pieced together by, like, it seems like the movie was, like, pieced together by, like, 4 different people who were all blind. I mean, like, the plot is insane. The conceit for the Suicide Squad is insane. And I'm not even saying, like, the idea of it is insane. I'm saying, like, the conceit of it as presented in the movie is insane. A guy says, what if Superman, who is now an established part of the universe, that's how they are selling this, is it's a DC Universe film. What if Superman ripped the roof off of the White House and grabbed the president? What if that happened? What would we do? Well, we'll call in the Suicide Squad. What? We'll call in the Suicide Squad. Oh my god. A Kryptonian who can shoot laser beams out of his eyes and can literally punch through the earth, kidnap the president. We need to call an assassin. That's really all Deadshot is. A crazy person with a hammer, Harley. Killer Croc, who's not even like... Killer Croc isn't even like super strength. He's literally just an above averagely strong person. That's what Killer Croc is. A fucking Captain Boomerang, who is literally like... I can't think of like a better description for Captain Boomerang than just basically a con man who happens to know how to throw a boomerang. And then, of course, finally, the only person who has any kind of, like, actual superpower, but is also highly volatile and might kill everybody in the squad at any given minute by accident, El Diablo. Yeah, call those guys in so Superman can line them up and then punch all their fucking heads off, because that's literally what he could do. I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, it was such... And I believe this was in the trailer of the movie, and I don't know how I, like, missed this insane, stupid justification for the creation of the Suicide Squad. Wow. No. You are vastly misallocating those resources. Yeah, so basically, Suicide Squad ends up being about 5 criminals, who are basically forced by the government to do a thing. It's something about like some fucking supernatural shit. They're addressing some supernatural shit, and then like I don't even know how this was. It's just so dumb. And then basically at the end of the movie, at the climax of the movie, they have to fight their other superpowered. She used to be part of the Suicide Squad, the witch lady, who's essentially a goddess and has the powers of a goddess. And it's so weird. And then they basically have to like kill her and rip her heart out and like stab it with a fucking pencil or something. I don't fucking... It's so dumb. It's so not appropriate for the Suicide Squad. It's so tonally... I don't even know how to put it. It's so not right. It's so wrong. It's such a misfire. But I mean, yeah, and I'm not. And that's pretty much it for the ones that are like really bad. I mean, again, I didn't see Justice League, and I'm not going to comment on it because of that. But I did see Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman is probably the only movie in the DC universe that is any good. And it's like, it's not bad, and it is a pretty good movie on its own merit. And it's a really good movie when you compare it to these, frankly, these piles of shit. Again, Man of Steel was alright. It wasn't a great start for the DC Universe movies, to be super frank about it. It didn't give you a lot of hope, but I mean, it was like so middle of the road that you were like, well, okay, if the next one's better than this, then it's like, then we're on to something here. But then the next one was Batman versus Superman, which was, as I've said, not good in the slightest. And I think the reason why, I guess the thing is that the tone that was carried over from the Dark Knight series and applied to Man of Steel kind of ruined that movie. At least it kept it from being a really great movie. It kind of anchored it and lowered it to being an okay movie. Slightly less than okay. And Batman vs. Superman really didn't do anything to change that. It just added this antagonistic element between Batman and Superman, and they don't really get to know each other on a deep level. They don't interact on a meaningful level. They literally just know that the other person's fucking mother is named Martha, and that's what brings them together. That is super unsatisfying. The whole movie was super unsatisfying. Lex Luthor as the villain was super unsatisfying. The explanation behind the creation of Doomsday, super unsatisfying, and also didn't make a whole lot of sense. The only good part of it was the Wonder Woman cameo, that's pretty much it. And then, as we said, Suicide Squad, complete terrible mess. And I think all of this could have been avoided if, in the case of Man of Steel. In the case of Man of Steel, don't try and recreate the atmosphere of The Dark Knight, because The Dark Knight is over. Also, I feel as though that the tone might not have tried to borrow or continue the Dark Knight tone, but I know the director, Zack Snyder, he directed Man of Steel, and he directed I think he directed Batman vs. Superman. He at least produced it or something. This is like kind of, and if you watch the Watchmen movie, which is actually pretty good, not part of like this connected universe of DC movies. Watchmen movie is kind of a standalone movie, and it's good because it is gritty and it is dark, and it does fit that Zack Snyder filmmaking style, I guess. The dark tone. I think Man of Steel would have done a great service had it been maybe Superman discovering himself, but actually discovering himself and becoming Superman, and not like being this like sad guy that is always sad, and it's really annoying. and not like this guy who is apparently totally cool with like giant amounts of collateral damage, because he's fighting his space uncle who he hates. And by contrast, the Batman vs. Superman could have done itself a great service had it not been this. If it had focused more on the relationship between Batman and Superman and not been just this like kind of wank fest, which I think it devolved into. And I don't like saying that, but I mean, like, there wasn't an understanding that was brought, that was achieved between Bruce and Clark. They just literally kind of have to team together because Doomsday is destroying everything, and also Batman decided not to kill Superman because, their mothers have the same name, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and it makes Batman seem like this like shallow. Oh God. The fact that Superman was even given trouble by Batman is kind of ridiculous. I mean, how it should have turned is that Superman gets the upper hand and then he doesn't basically kill Batman, and that's how Batman finds out, like, oh, you're not a giant sack of shit like I thought you were. And then Suicide Squad, to be completely honest, there is no fixing that movie unless you just fucking, like, the only way to fix it is to throw it out, because I mean, unless you just totally, like, rewrote the script, unless you just totally rewrote it, the whole thing, from top to bottom, and completely re-edited it, and reshot parts of it. Like, that movie was just not good. It was terrible. It was terrible. I don't know. It doesn't even have the dark tone that Man of Steel tried to replicate. It doesn't have the dark tone that, the pseudo dark tone, I guess. Batman vs. Superman was a little bit lighter, but it still had that, like, it still had Batman in it, who was, like, going around, like, branding people with his Batarang. But at least Superman was slightly less mopey and sober all the time. Sobering, I should say. But yeah, Suicide Squad, it didn't have that, like, dark tone. It had that weird cinematography choice where they just make everything seem darker for some reason. Like, that's annoying. Like, that's present throughout all these movies. And I don't understand why. I think if they had made Suicide Squad to just make sense, that would have been good enough. You know, that would have been fine. But I think the reason why the Marvel movies are so much more successful is because they have kind of a sense of humor about themselves. And I don't even really give a shit about any of them, which is kind of weird, but I know that a lot of people love them and enjoy them, and I think it's because there's a sense of levity to them, and they're not just relentless, like, dark, shaded, sad sacks just being like just being sad all the time. And that's kind of what the DC universe has been, besides Wonder Woman, which was very light, or not very light, but it had, like, a lot of lightness to it and a lot of levity, and it was fun. So DC should make more fun movies. Alright, that's it. Y'all do you.